Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Now, you know I want you to grab a notepad and a pen because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment that you will jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today. That's what this is all about, implementation to drive your business forward. Now, I do have some good news. I'm going to share some notes on the screen, and those notes will be made available to you for free download. You can just go to the link in the description and enter your name and email address, and we'll send you a PDF copy of the notes that I share on the screen. So those aren't the notes that I want you to take. I want you to be stimulated by some part of our discussion and think about your business and implement something that is very relevant in your business. Now, today we are going to talk about problem solving, and that's really critical in business. Of course, it's critical in life. In fact, what I share with you today is so often the case, you can use in all parts of your life to become more effective as a person. But we're going to focus on becoming more effective in management and running our businesses. And so we will, as I give you the examples, we'll be looking at this through the case, the instance of a business problem and solving business problems. But really, I'm telling you what we go through today, which will be first principles problem solving. I'm sure you're familiar with that. You've heard of that. First principles problem solving, taking things back to basics, going right back to the very fundamental things, those principles, those axioms on which you sort of hang your hat, on which you govern yourself, those paradigms day to day that you live by, taking things back to that in order to solve any problem. So you may have problems in your business that relate to human resources. You're having a challenge between a couple of members of your team. It could be to do with sales and profitability, expenses, or logistically, somehow you're running into some problems with customer satisfaction. It doesn't matter what the problem is, you can use this technique, this simple technique we're gonna go through today to solve your problem. So I'll bring up some notes on the screen and I'll just take you through, there's sort of three simple steps to utilize, to engage in order to try to execute first principles problem solving. So let me bring up those notes. Okay, first principles problem solving, and as you can see on the screen here, what we're going to use as a case study, or an example case rather, is increasing sales. So let's say you have a challenge and you're like, well, how do I increase sales? So the first thing you do is you consider your axioms. What are the first principles? What are those things that we know for certain? Now, you may say to me, well, I don't know anything for certain. And philosophically, you might be correct. There may be a little bit of doubt theoretically in everything. All the premises that we have, all of the paradigms we have are subject to change over time, and we learn, and I've heard it said, I think Elon Musk likes to say, that we know for sure we're wrong, we just don't know the degree to which we're wrong. So, but when we talk about an axiom, a first principle, it's those things, that's why I have it in quotation marks there, that you would think you know for certain, you're pretty sure about. And what I would argue is that whether, we wouldn't get hung up on that philosophical or theoretical point about you may have some flaws in whatever you have for an axiom. I wouldn't get hung up on that because you're already acting in a way that would demonstrate that you believe these things to be true. In other words, we can only operate on those premises that we believe to be true. So consider your axioms. So the very first step that we have in solving the problems through first principles is to consider those principles that are most relevant in this area. So I'll bring up some things related to increasing sales, some first principles. These are things that I definitely believe in. The first one here is people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. That's an axiom that I live by, and I believe that. That's what I have found to be true time and again. Are there exceptions? There are perhaps exceptions to every rule, to every principle, perhaps. But when you're using this technique, go to the most fundamental things that you believe in and that you have found to be true and document those, bring them up. And they're those things that are related to the problem that you're trying to solve in this case. increasing sales. The second one I have up here is the primary reason people do not buy is fear of making a mistake. I believe that to be true. The third thing I have is people always act in their own self-interest. They always need an answer to the subconscious question. The subconscious question, that's a bit of a tongue twister there. What's in it for me? WIIFM 97.9 on your FM dial. People are always asking, what's in it for me? They're always acting in their own self-interest. That's an axiom that I live by. I believe that to be true. Number 4, people willingly engage in commensurate value exchange. They only pay for something that they value more than what they are giving. And that's how we all operate. In any exchange, we are giving away something that in our perception is worth less than that what we are getting back. And there's a whole video on that. If you say, well, what about when people are being charitable and that kind of thing? We discussed that in that video. But this is another axiom as it relates to sales that I can hang my hat on. I can count on this being true almost all the time. Number 5, there are 4 constituents of value, those being customer experience, convenience, quality, and pricing. If I understand that to be true, that will affect how I solve my problems. Number 6, speed is a fundamental determinant of any business success. Now, I took that one from Elon Musk. He just worded it in a way that I thought was really concise, and I believe that to be true as well. We need to operate with great efficiency that leads to speed and gives us a competitive advantage. So those were some axioms I put down that I believe in that relate to increasing sales. That's the first step. You document those. So if it's a human resource problem, you're going to figure out what things do you believe in as they relate to the humanities portion of your business. Or if it's a customer satisfaction thing, and some of these axioms might be the same. They may spill over from one problem to another. Often, first principles do. They relate to everything. People acting in their own self-interest. Certainly that affects the humanities of your business. And by all means, that's why I say you can download these notes and you're welcome to use these. You may disagree with some of my axioms. They may not be on your list of first principles as it relates to the problem you're trying to solve, but they may be. And go ahead and use those. All right, the next step, once you've done that, is you're going to ask questions. You're going to ask yourself questions. And your questions are going to be based on the axioms. So have those questions that you've documented, or rather have those axioms that you've documented, those first principles beside you somewhere, and then ask yourself a question. Just chronologically go through the list and ask yourself a question. So the first example I have up there is, what can be done to increase our target market's knowledge, affinity, and trust for us? So that's based on that axiom that people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. Since that's the first principle, since that's the axiom I believe in, then if I want to increase sales, I create a question based on those axioms. And the first question I have up there, what can be done to increase our target market's knowledge, affinity, and trust for us? Another question I put down is, who presently knows, likes, and trusts us the most? So you might say, well, actually, our present customers, people who've already decided to do business with us and they love us, or those delighted customers, they love us the most. And you can see where you would go in step 3 as your strategy. You might say, to increase sales based on the answer to that question, perhaps we should be looking at how we can get more sales from our existing customers. But this is very thought-provoking. These questions are meant to stimulate your, it's not going to be completely revolutionary. It's not going to be like an aha magic pill moment. You're going to, like I say, it's going to be thought-provoking, and it's going to stimulate you to remind yourself of things you already know. The third question I have up there is, how can we remove people's fear of making a mistake associated with buying from us? So of course, that's based on the axiom that the number one thing that prevents people from buying is fear of making a mistake. So based on that axiom, based on that first principle, I come up with a question. Also, what can we do to increase people's fear of making a mistake associated with buying from the competition? You might think that's a little underhanded, but that is a very common technique based on that axiom. If you believe that people the number one thing preventing people from buying is fear of making a mistake, not only do you want to minimize their fear of making a mistake in dealing with you, you may want to emphasize those things that could be a mistake in dealing with the competition. Again, based on transparency and honesty. You don't want to make up anything about your competition that's not true. But if you know that your competition is more expensive, for example, you might have something in your marketing that emphasizes that as a mistake if somebody's going to pay too much by dealing with the competition. The fifth question I have down here, and these are again just examples in my case of increasing sales. Are we expecting or asking prospective customers to do anything that is in our best interest, not theirs? So that question came as reading the axiom and considering, contemplating the axiom that people always act in their own best interest. So if I'm doing something that expects someone to do something that's in my best interest but not theirs, then I'm fighting an axiom. I'm going against the grain. I'm going against the laws of nature. I'm going against those first principles. Anytime you operate and make business decisions that go against your axioms, you're going to run into problems. That's at the premise and the heart of how you solve these problems using first principles thinking. That's why it pays to take the time to reevaluate and contemplate, to consider, meditate upon those axioms and consider what do we know for certain, and then ask yourself questions that might reveal and expose areas that you're going against something you already know, and then it's not surprising to you that you're encountering a problem. Another question I have up here based on the axiom: what can be done to better communicate the value of our processes, methodologies, and models in order to answer their what's in it for me question? So people are always asking that question. So I want to consider, well, when I communicate value to my customers, am I truly considering what's in it for me? Am I answering that question in a way that resonates with my customers? Another question: what is our unique value proposition for each service offered? And if I can't answer that question very clearly, then I'm probably not communicating it well to my customers. Which services do we offer that represent the best value? Should we focus more on these and not fret when other services don't sell? So we're getting a little more granular with our questions, but it's still based on those first principles, based on those axioms, based on the paradigm, what we know for sure, because we don't want to be going against the flow of what we know for certain. Are there new service offerings that represent uncommon value that we should consider offering? Do we need to add or reorganize existing resources to execute this? Again, just examples of questions you should ask if you're trying to increase sales. What measures do we employ to ensure that we execute quickly? And of course, you can see that relates to that speed is a fundamental determinant of success for any business. And if you believe that, then you want to ask yourself, what are we doing? How are we making sure that we are executing quickly in the delivery of our products or services? So those are the questions. And now what do we do with that information? How do we, what's this third step? You can see it on the screen right now. You strategize and plan. So you went through your axioms, you documented all those, then you wrote down some good questions. And here is just some best practices. I'm not going to share a strategy with you because that would be very business dependent, but we could throw out some examples or whatever. Instead, I'm going to give you some best practices of things you need to implement during your strategizing and your planning stage. So based on the answers to questions, you need to focus on becoming better than yesterday. Don't get hung up on perfection. Instead, what you want to make sure you're doing is just improving. We believe in continuous improvement, perpetual refinement, better than yesterday. That's something we talk about all the time at BMI. What are we doing to become better than yesterday? That's in alignment with our value of perpetual refinement. And I really would encourage people, because I see this all the time, managers are trying to make something perfect, and maybe they think of something, unless it's perfect or darn near perfect, it's not a solution. That's not a good way to think. Instead, what can we implement based on those questions we asked? And those questions were based on the axioms. What can we implement that makes us a little bit better than we were yesterday? That's going to help to improve sales, to solve the problem. Collaborate with key stakeholders. Now, you as the manager, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and you're watching this, if you wish to try to solve a problem by yourself, there's nothing really wrong with that. I can appreciate you doing that, but you always want to collaborate with your key stakeholders and ensure that you have some sort of alignment of objectives and share. You know, you have a team, and many of you have different size businesses. Some of you are mostly relying on yourself, but don't forget any of your other stakeholders. This could include your frontline personnel, your logistics personnel, those that execute on the delivery of your products or services. They may be involved in manufacturing of it, or it could be your frontline personnel, reception people that are involved in customer service. It could be your customers themselves. Any number of other stakeholders can help you solve your problem. So that's a key best practice as it relates to first principles, problem solving. Collaborate with other key stakeholders. Don't leave it all on your shoulders. Document your answers to these questions. When you're contemplating this stuff, don't leave it in your head. I've seen people discuss things and they're doing the right steps. They are considering axioms. They're going, yeah, well, we know that people buy from those that they know, like, and trust, in my example. And then they ask themselves, okay, so who most knows, likes, and trusts us? They ask that question, they're not documenting it, and then they're considering the answer. Leaving it all in your head, you can still get some, especially if you're thinking on the fly and you're trying to solve a problem really quickly for a scenario you're going into. Maybe you're in the quote unquote the heat of a battle with a customer and you're trying to solve a problem really quickly. Yes, you can do that in your head, but when you're dealing with those major problems in your business, you want to document everything. Okay, so that's why we talk about strategizing and planning. So don't just leave this in your head and then try to communicate it and remember it for later. That's not a best practice. Translate your answers into tasks and action items. So if your answer is, for example, who knows and likes us and trusts us the most, and you say, well, our existing delighted customers, and it's like, okay, that's the answer. Now, what's a task or an action item? It might be, well, we need to reach out to them and find out, or maybe a action item is, let's find out who is most delighted. And you may then say, well, what is an action item? We're going to create a customer satisfaction survey. And then, from there, we're going to offer a sales promotion to those people and so on. Those are what I mean on creating tasks and action items. The answers to your questions in and of themselves may not be an action item. So that's another step you have to do, is create these action items as part of your strategizing and planning. And then what you do is you create a current to desired state plan. And all that is, we've got a whole video on that, so watch that video. But you're taking all of these action items and these tasks that you've created, and you're documenting them sort of chronologically, and there's steps. I don't want to make this video go too long, so make sure you watch that video, and then a couple of the next things that I'm going to bring up on the screen will help you with creating that current to desired state plan that you're going to progress through. You'll be in a transitional state as you implement some of these improvements, and that's how you're going to solve your problems. Tackle low-hanging fruit and best opportunities for refinement first. And we have videos on that as well, of which opportunities should I pursue first, and sort of plotting those things that are the best opportunities, those things that will give you the best return on your investment with the lowest application of resources, the lowest utilization and deployment of resources, those things that maybe that are really practical to implement, and they have large returns. So as you're considering these things and they're manifesting, becoming clear to you from the answers to your questions, and you're creating tasks and action items with it, then what I'm saying is you have to put those in order and figure out what you're going to do, and you're going to pursue those, the low-hanging fruit first. And then the last one is utilize RACI for implementation. Now, RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, Informed. Again, I have a whole video on that, and please consult that if you don't know what this means. Don't write this off and say, well, I kind of get the premise. I got the first 2.5, 3 steps. I get that. So these other things are going to be really important. And in that video, we'll talk about, for example, that when you're implementing RACI, you have to have deadlines, and that helps to hold all the various stakeholders accountable. And so make sure that you're doing all of these best practices as part of your strategizing and your planning process. So there it is. There in 3 simple steps is how you implement first principles problem solving. And remember, this relates to anything in life. You can solve any problem, whether it's personal or professional, in your business or otherwise. And after I went through this with somebody recently, very soon thereafter, I encountered an issue with something in family life. And I remember immediately my brain just naturally, because I had so recently gone through this exercise in business, my brain went to the same thing. And I said, well, what do I know for certain? What axioms do I have? What paradigms and first principles can I rely on? And there is a difference. I'm using that term almost synonymously. Our paradigms tend to be things that we believe are first principles. You want to challenge your paradigms. We have a video on that as well. But what happened was I realized that you can easily utilize this exact same problem-solving strategy for anything in life. And so whether it's philosophy, theology, family, all these kinds of things that your hobbies, cooking, whatever you're trying to do, start with those first principles and list those, and then ask yourself questions based on that, and then take those questions and contemplate them, convert them into action items. Well, you got the idea. Download the notes. I think I want to leave it there for now for today. I'm curious what you thought of this. I hope you got something out of this. Leave a comment and ask me if you want me to follow up on this and elaborate, or if you're pushing back on this and you say, well, I don't agree with that, you're missing something. It has to be, first principles have to be based on things that are entirely true. There can't be any, I don't know where you would debate me on this, but I think it is healthy for us to have a little bit of dissension and debate and discussion. So leave that kind of stuff in the comments. And when you leave that in the comments, then other people in the community who are watching this and they're trying to solve problems, they read your comment and it helps them to learn. And we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.